Thank you. Just going to give this a whirl, see how we go. Okay, a few font issues. But anyway, so yes, my name's Cory Banks. I suppose a diverse background in having worked in the finance sector, in engineering and construction, in amateur sport and professional sport environments, and currently find myself out on my own after taking a redundancy. Yes, there is life after a redundancy. And actually find myself at the moment doing some work for one of the large city councils up in Queensland, so we'll be talking about that in a bit. This is a nice little symbol that I've used for the KM program that we ran within Parsons Brinckerhoff. And it was mainly to tell people that when you come into this space, beware, you're actually going to have to think. You can't just react, you can't just be passive and sit back. You're actually going to have to think and take on board. And particularly some of the stuff you've probably heard from Richard may not have sat well with you. You might have disagreed with some of the things that he's putting forward. But hopefully you're able to sit there and go, okay, well hold on, why am I disagreeing with that? Why doesn't that fit my picture? And I'll talk a little bit about cognitive biases in a moment, which is the basis of some of that. What I'm going to get around, it's one of the barriers I'm pushing at the moment, is the supply and demand of knowledge and information. And particularly in the fact that most of the time we talk about the supply. We talk about the collections that we have, we talk about the records that we have, the documents. We talk about the subscriptions, the lessons learned, the transfer of those, being able to search for those. But we don't necessarily spend too much time looking at the demand side of the market that you have there. Now, particularly around some of that supply, we've got that wonderful word, compliance. Oh yes. We have to do these sorts of things because we are required to do so by law in most cases. But I want to sort of tip it on its side and look at it a bit like this. So the demand that we worked on when we put our program in place was saying we generate value from what we know, from the information that we have, when we use it. What's really interesting, I had a look at Victorian State Government have a standard around web publishing. So you go and create this content, it gets reviewed, it gets posted online. At a particular point in time, it then gets taken offline and it gets archived. It went through this life cycle of this content. Not once in that life cycle did it talk about the stuff actually getting read or getting used or actually creating value for either the organisation or the consumer that's out there, the member of the public. So far too often we don't consider how the stuff gets used and how we generate value from it. I spoke at the RIPO conference in Queensland a few weeks ago now. Talked about the missing link. And it's around, yes, there are compliance requirements where we have to store this stuff, we have to hold it, we've got retention schedules, we've got all these sorts of things. But for all that content, we can still be using it to generate value for the business, for our constituents, for the organisation. So, making decisions and solving problems. That's where the rubber hits the road. And then we work backwards from there. So having a look at what comes in the equation, knowledge, information and data. There is no pyramid. You don't take data and then put it in formation to create information and then analyse that information and then create knowledge and then finally we gain wisdom while sitting at the top of some Tibetan mountain somewhere. We use all three at the same time in the same process. We look at data, we look at information and we combine it with our experience and our expertise, hopefully not just of ourselves but also of others in a collaborative nature, to come up with the best decision that we can make or the best solution that we can put in place to the problems that we have. But that's not the only things we should be considering, because there's a few other things that form part of this equation. The strategic direction, where you're going, either as a team, as a unit, as an organisation, or as a council in itself. Where are we going? That should be providing us with direction and influencing the decisions that we make and the solutions that we provide. Risk. Our appetite for risk will also affect the decisions that we make. Yammer. Classic one, Richard bringing up. Woohoo! Isn't that a whole lot of fun? You don't even need to want it, and it appears. anyone with the email address of your organisation can go online and create a Yammer instance, or a social cast instance, or any of the other dozen platforms that are out there that allow this sort of thing to happen. Within Parsons Brinkerhoff, the organisation I work for, we've got about 2,500 people here in Australia. We're a global organisation. In 2008, Yammer won the TechCrunch Awards where it came into fruition. We signed up with a couple of people, myself and someone in our learning and development team, and went and played just to see, hey, what does this thing do? How does it work and operate? There was then about 8 of us that were in there mucking around for a couple of years. Suddenly, within 2 weeks, we went from 8 members to 550 members. But no one was using it. And the key was the viral nature in which it permeates your organisation, it permeates your networks. Because what happens is, someone gets an invite from someone else who they trust, who says, this is good stuff, come get some. So they sign up. The first thing they get asked is, right, 10 of your mates. Sounds like a pyramid scheme, doesn't it? Sign up 10 of your mates. And then what's even better is Yammer then will spam you. Hey, remember that person who nominated you? They're still waiting for you to come on board. I got a phone call from one of our directors in the organisation. Unfortunately, it had my name attached with it somewhere. Who said, look, I've signed up to this thing, but I don't know what it is. And I said, well, yeah, obviously you haven't looked at your IT acceptable use policy because you really should have done that. He said, but I got an invite from my exec assistant. And I trust her. She said I should get on board, so I'm on board. So again, what is that risk profile, that your appetite for risk as to whether you're going to take a leap, you're going to do something. Process also forms a part. What authorities are there? Who needs to sign off on what? What constraints are there around compliance, what we can and can't do? All forms part of this. But one of the most influential factors is what your organisation is, who your people are. The systems and symbols and behaviours that exist, the norms, the way we do things around here, all those different ways in which culture, and you will notice if you take the UR and E off the end, it is a cult. How that influences what we do, how we do it, the decisions that we make, and the problems that we solve. So here's the story that I had. So after 2 coffees and a lunch, which was my interview process for starting to work for PB, I sat down with my boss. That's not him, by the way. It's just a picture. But initially he said, right, I want you to get this KM program off the ground. And then after a couple of months when you're ready, we'll start talking about innovation. I said, hey, why don't we start talking about innovation now? And he said, no. Just get some fundamentals in place, get some foundations in there, and then we can start talking about that. So after 6 months, I knocked on the door and said, righto, let's start talking about innovation. And he said, I've got this idea. We need to be more innovative. I said, right, okay. He says, but I don't know what that means. He said, does that mean that I should create a team of people as the innovation team? Does it mean that I should start giving out funding to innovation projects in the business? How does this work and how does this operate? So what we did was we went and consulted. We went and said, well, let's go and ask the business. What do they think innovation is and how does it work? Now, in this organisation, there's a wonderful term they use called the silver bullet. And every proposal that was issued out of the organisation had to have a silver bullet. This is the thing that's going to nail. This is what will win it for us. This is our USP for people who know that sort of language. This is going to make a difference. Okay? So we talk with these people, and what we actually got down to saying, well, it's not a unit and a team, and it's not even really a process. It's a state of mind. It's a behaviour. And what we looked at was creative problem solving. And saying where we can be truly innovative is when we're identifying what the problem is and what the solution is to that problem, we need to add some different ingredients into that mix. Because God only knows when we sit down at the table with 6 mechanical engineers and give them a problem, yes, we're going to get 8 different solutions come off the table, but they're all going to be mechanical engineering solutions. So what was really important was breaking down the silos and getting some diversity, not only around the solution, but even around the problem. To get a different perspective, to make better sense of the environment and the situation that we found ourselves in, to better understand what the problem is, to give yourself a better chance of being more successful in the solution that you design. So we've talked about some of the key things that we went through, some of the principles that we adopted. I'm going to leave it fairly generic because, again, we designed this solution specific to this organisation and this situation. It will be different in each of your organisations as to where you're at, but you can adopt some of those principles and see how they might float in your space. But first of all, we needed to understand what we're up against. A wonderful thing called cognitive bias. Even just getting on Wikipedia, there's a wonderful list just from that. All these cognitive biases of the way that we think. Now, some of it is cultural, but some of it is also stemmed from human nature, from the evolution of the beast that we are, and how we think, how we approach, how we react to certain situations, what we do. So here's some of them. Let's see if we can get this going. The brain is a pattern matching device. Okay? We create patterns. Patterns through experience, patterns through what we see, hear, smell, all the senses coming together. And the brain records those patterns and matches up the neurons, and there they are. The more frequently we use that pattern, the more ingrained it becomes, until actually it becomes a habit. And when we become unconscious that we're actually doing it anymore. Does anyone remember driving to work this morning? It can become such a habit and ingrained that you don't. You're not even conscious that you've necessarily made that journey or done that activity, because it's become part of what you do. It's not exactly that accurate. We look for best fit. So if it looks like a dog and smells like a dog, yep, I'm registering that as a dog. The fight or flight response. It's so ingrained in the base, in the basal area, that we don't even have a choice. You hear a loud noise, you will jump. And you'll do one or two things. You'll run or you'll stay and fight, depending on who's in danger. We make assumptions all the time. Right now, you're making assumptions. Because your field of vision is only a certain amount, there's a certain focus point within your field of vision that you are seeing and taking in. There's then a whole bunch of assumptions. It's how your mind works. It can't take in all the data and process that at the same time. It takes leaps. It says, well, I'm just going to assume that gravity's going to hang around for a while and I'll be able to stand up. I don't need to worry about that. Move on. We're not analytical. We've been trying over the last few thousand years to train ourselves to be logical and analytical, but we're not. Raw emotions are much more powerful than logical thought. Think back to what Richard was saying this morning, some of those points that you thought, hold on, no, he's crazy, he's psycho, I don't know where he's coming from, I don't know what he's been smoking over there entirely, but some of that had an emotional pull. And those emotions will outweigh the logic. Failure imprints better. So we actually learn more from our mistakes than we do from our successes. Pretty important with that one, because particularly when you ask people to recall, okay, how did that project go? Oh, well, let me tell you, it was a shocker. Boom, 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 boom. All the bad things tend to come out first. And you actually, in the lessons learned exercises we do, you actually have to prod and pry to find, well, did anything go right? Oh, yeah, I suppose so. But the first things to jump out are the things that went bad, or the failures that occurred. We like gifting people with the answer. We want to make them happy. We want them to like us. So if what you want to know is the project's running okay, well, I'll tell you it's running okay. Green lights, all the way down. Ding, 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 ding. I'm working in a bank up in Queensland, in the portfolio management area. The project reports would come in and they'd be filtered through the account manager. So the project managers would produce these status reports and we'd go to the account manager and say, yeah, we might just move that a bit and that a bit and that a bit. And we get these reports that come in with all green traffic lights, all down the front of the page. Now, that very rarely ever happens, that a project runs that smoothly, that everything's green lights all the way, no worries, yep, we're going to hit budget, we're going to hit schedule, and we're going to deliver on time and to the quality that the customer wants. Nope. No such place on this planet exists. But we like to give people the answer. I'll get upset if we tell them. I used to work for the Department of Emergency Services in Queensland, and I managed the intranet team and the e-services team. And there was an interesting thing that during our monthly reports that we submitted, we highlighted a particular issue that was occurring with some of the software that we had. And we kept highlighting this in each status report that came up. And come time for budget next year, we were tapped on the shoulder and said, right, it's now time for us to fix this problem. Cool, sweet. The data centre guys had put in a massive wish list and said, this is what we want for the next year. We want to increase the SAM, we want to change the wide area network, we want to do this, we want to do that. Woohoo! And they said, well, hold on. For the last 12 months you've been telling us that everything's great, everything's rosy, it's all green lights. Oh, well, no. Well, hold on. Which way do you want it? You can't have it both ways. Serendipitous recall. You only really know, here we go, it's a bit of a Rumsfeldism here. You only really know what you need to know when you need to know it. So it's only when you're actually in the situation will you realise that you have competence. And this is why we run simulations. So we do these sorts of things and scenario planning. We try and put ourselves in that situation to test ourselves. But only really when you're in that situation will you really know what you need to know. And we seek symmetry. Classic one, the SWOT analysis. Anyone done a SWOT analysis recently? Have you been compelled to actually put something in every box? Well, we've got to find a weakness. We've got to find a threat. Hold on, there's got to be an opportunity there. We have to put something in that box. Maybe you don't. Maybe there is no opportunity in the topic that you're talking about. Maybe there is no threat. But we're compelled to have that balance, to have that symmetry there. So the main thing is that we need to be aware of this. This is how we think. This is how we approach things. And through that awareness, we can then design something that can perhaps take people out of those comfort zones. Can make people realise that, hold on, when Richard was saying that, it didn't fit my pattern. Why is that? Why is that? Why isn't that working for me? Why did I find such an issue with that? Rather than just going, no, he's not. He's not in the room, is he? I think he's gone. So we developed these principles, which were at the core of what we did, in the training that we did, in the mantras that we had, in the communications that we had with the business. This is more of a change management thing, but it's do it with the people, not to them. So engage with them, collaborate with them, get them involved in the design. When we actually designed this program and launched it in the business, we took 20 people from diverse areas of the organisation and we sent them out to look at 14 different creative problem-solving models and training that's out there. We said, go and have a look, and then we'll all come back and we'll say, well, what do you think will work for us? And what do you know, we developed a hybrid. Because looking at what Kepler Trigo had over here around that, well, that's really good, but that's not going to work. We'll come over here to the Osborne Parnes creative problem-solving model, and that's really good, the divergent, convergent, like that. But that brainstorming thing, maybe, maybe not. So engaging them in defining what the problem is and what the solution is. And that can go as far as to talk about what Richard talked about with that crowdsourcing. Even engaging with people outside the organisation to say, hold on, we want to get a better idea. Reuse, recycle, renew. Do we already have one of these things? Is it just a waste of our time actually going and building and designing another one? Engineers, famous for this. Not doing that, but doing the opposite. No, it's a unique situation. Or can we at least take 80% of the work that we did on that bridge and reuse it on this bridge over here? No. I need to design this. It's my project. Just a little bit of ego. Anyone here dealt with engineers? You don't know what I'm talking about, do you? No. Ooh, here we start getting a bit existential. Thinking about your thinking. And this is that situational awareness, the emotional intelligence, all those sorts of things. To say, well, hold on, why am I thinking that way? Do I need to change my thinking or change someone else's thinking? And how do I do that through influence? But just being conscious that, hold on, why did I feel that way when someone said that? Is a starting point. Identify the problem first. It usually helps. No. Straight into solution mode. Computer programmers. Straight to coding. Yes. No. I've got some libraries. I can just call this up. Hold on, let's do some modeling first. Let's develop some personas. Let's understand the problems that are faced by the users before we start just doing up some screens. Be aware of the first pattern match. Looks like a dog, smells like a dog, right, let's go and build a dog kennel. And 9 times out of 10 you're probably right. But what if it's not a dog? What if it is a mutant rat? You don't want a dog kennel, you want a very good rat trap. Completely different design, completely different solution. So yes, okay, if it's a dog, that's what we'll build, but what if it's not? What if that's not the problem? Get past that first pattern match. And be conscious that yes, I've just thought that's automatically the thing I'll do. That's the assumption that my brain has made. I've followed that pattern. Yep, it's just another one of those. And if it's relatively simple, it probably is. But if you don't understand the complexity of it, then you might have it wrong. Diversity of thought. So we had a classic case where we said, righto, instead of having that desk full of mechanical engineers sitting there nutting it out, a bit of mail bonding going on and all those sorts of things, let's put an environmental scientist at the table. Let's put a project manager. Let's put a community consultation person in there. Let's put an electrical engineer. And got a very different view of what the problem was and what they were actually dealing with, let alone what the design of the solution should be. Very different perspective. They made sense of it in a very different way. We'll talk a little bit about complexity a bit later on, but understand the complexity of what you're dealing with. What you also need to understand is that different people will have a different view of the complexity. What someone thinks is quite hard and difficult and quite complex to comprehend, let alone do, another person who's been doing it for 30 years just says, no, that's simple, that's easy. So understand that it's not just about the complexity, but it's the diverse perspectives of complexity that you've got to deal with as well. It was interesting, in talking with the engineers, I relayed some stories around with Queensland Fire and Rescue and with the Queensland Ambulance Service and these sorts of people. But yes, assumptions can kill. I assumed that was going to happen, oops, wrong thing, fatality. When they made it quite clear to me that, well, Cory, if we make assumptions, we don't just kill a few people, we can kill hundreds of people. Buildings collapsing, planes falling out of the sky, these sorts of things. So it's very critical, again, to get past those patterns and realise the assumptions that we make and just get them on a piece of paper and work with them and around them. And of course, most importantly, reflect and share the experience. So what you've been through, someone else can reuse, recycle and renew and push it out. Don't assume that, yes, and we did this wonderful report and we filed it in the DMS and anyone who knows the right tags can come and find it. No. You do a little comp strategy and you say, who is the audience that will get the most benefit from this and how do I get it in their face? So working with PP who had a classic mentality of a diversity of lessons learned reports, anything from photos in a zip file that they would send around to people, to PowerPoint presentations, to a full 120-page documented report that no one ever read. To say, hold on, who is your audience? What is the best way to deal with this and communicate it across them? What's the best vehicle to use? And what's the actual message you're trying to send? Which ended up in these guys saying, right, we're going to put aside $30,000 for that group of 4 people to go on the road and sit down with every good electrical engineering team in the country and let them know about what we learned from this project. Because in the future, on the first project, we reckon it'll save us $2 million and about $1.5 million for every project after that. So the value proposition was there. But they had to get it out. Again, well, let's just assume that, well, we've just supplied it, we've stuck it in the repository, people will find it. No. They won't. Because with the egos that they have, their first pattern match, yep, I know what I'm doing. I don't need to do any research and look behind me. Let's just look forward. Away we go. We'll jump in with 2 feet. Okay. So a bit around complexity. Anyone seen this model before? Okay. It's called the Cynefin model. Don't ask me to spell it. It's a Welsh word. Developed by Dave Snowden and some of his compatriots out of IBM at one stage, now trading as cognitive edge. And what this talks about is saying, okay, well there's a sequence around here saying some things are quite simple and they're known. A plus B will always equal C. It's almost a constant. You can almost guarantee that when this sort of situation occurs, this is the outcome that's going to occur. And it's easy for anyone to understand that, apply some common sense and achieve the outcome. The domain of the standard operating procedure. Here's how to send a fax. Maybe here's how to write a press release, probably not. It might fit more in the complicated space. But simple stuff. As we go up a level of complexity, we talk about complicated and knowable. A plus B does equal C, but we need an expert to tell us what C is. We need someone who has done this before, the realm of the expert in here, the subject matter expert. Cause and effect separated over time and space. So yes, we will reach a similar outcome, but it's going to take a bit of analysis for us to work out what that is. Getting up to the next level, we get into the complex space. So only after it's happened can we actually work out why it happened. A plus B equals C today. Tomorrow it's going to equal D. The next Tuesday it's going to be a cow. Each time you do it, you get a different outcome. Anything to do with people will usually start from that space there because of the diversity of opinions that you have. And then you've got chaos. Couldn't work out why it happened, but it did. And in this situation here, we act, we sense and respond. And if what we do works, keep doing it. If it doesn't, throw it out and try something new. 9/11. To a certain extent, Victorian bushfires in that space, in that crisis space there. So the biggest issue you've got is if you mistakenly treat the problem that you're dealing with and it ends up in the wrong space. So for example, if I had actually quite a complex problem, but I treated it as a simple problem and just said, well, all we need to do is write a new procedure and issue that, and people will go and do it. She'll be right. Not necessarily. Okay? Can mean that something that is put in here can very quickly fall over this lip here into this. You're dealing with a completely different situation. What you mainly do is in this space here, you'll break it up and you'll say, well, some of these things are quite complex, but bits of it can go this way, and bits of that can come this way. So this here will normally flow that way, back into complex. But understanding the complexity can then give you a better idea as to the approach that you need to take and the consultation that you need to have. So in here, anyone should be able to work out the answer and solve the problem. Up here, okay, no, we actually need to someone who knows about this stuff. Over here, actually, we need to talk to a few different people and get very different perspectives around this. This is the example that we developed at PB. It was called D6, funnily enough. It's amazing what you can do with a thesaurus and looking up 6 words that begin with D. But we mainly looked at the problem first. Discover the situation, divergent thinking, talking to a variety of different people, a lot of brainstorming around, hold on, what's causing this? Root cause analysis, digging deeper, and coming up with a variety of ideas. Then and only then do we start diverging to actually say, right, well that's good. We did come up that alien abduction could be causing this, but we might just write that one off for now. And diverge back to define exactly what the problem is that we're dealing with. And then go through the situation again with solution. Develop a variety of different solutions through some diversity of thought, some collaboration with different parts of the organisation or outside the organisation, and then come to a solution. Come to a decision, this is a solution that we're going to put in place. And then is when you pick up with your change management and your project management. Far too often we start with the project management and we try to develop this scope for a project, but we haven't actually analysed what the problem is that we're trying to solve. But we know that we're going to need 1 of those, 2 of those and 3 of those, so let's just manage that project. You're delivering something that's not necessarily solving the problem. So it's very important, because we found with our engineers, they were probably starting here. And yes, in simple situations where yes, all I had to do was design a bridge over a road for a school, pedestrian bridge, relatively simple. Yes, we could jump straight to the conclusion that we've already got one of those out of the box, we can just deliver that. But if they got that wrong, and it's actually quite a complex problem, and they don't have all the facts, they don't understand the liquefaction that's taken place in that particular space due to the geology that's there. They don't understand about the council regulations around what can and can't be put in that place. They don't understand around the community's point of view of this terrible hulking monstrosity that's going to go across in front of the school. Classic point in case. I talked with the head of our community consultation group who used to run into these sorts of things. You'd get a phone call like on a Friday afternoon saying, oh, g'day Lisa, hey, how's it going? Yeah, just wanted to let you know, we've won some work for you. Oh, you have you? Yeah. We've got this project up in northern New South Wales where we're putting these bridges in place through this area. And it's required some community consultation because apparently there's some environmentally sensitive areas up there and that sort of thing. So we said, hey, we've got some community consultation people in, so we put you in as part of the bid. You did you? Okay. What did you put in? Well, originally we thought it'd probably be about $50,000 worth of work, but then we cut that back and said, nah, it should be right, there's about $20,000 in there. And what did you put in the spec? What did you say we were going to do? Well, some great stuff. We're going to do some stuff in the media, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, yada, some social media stuff, and then we're going to do this over here, and oh, it's all some cool things. Okay, you just described roughly about $250,000 worth of work that you've already signed us up for $20,000. So actually, no, I don't want this job. I don't want this piece of work. So didn't consult, didn't understand the problem, didn't talk with the right people around, hold on, this is actually quite big, quite complex. And even when talking to the client may not understand the complexity. So the main roads department who wanted that, the RTA, the local council may not understand the complexity of what they're dealing with. So again, only through consultation, getting a variety of people around it, can we get a really good picture as to what this is. And actually, no, we're better off probably building a tunnel rather than building a bridge, rather than the assumptions that have been made. So divergent and convergent, which comes from the Osborne and Parnes. So Osborne and Parnes in the marketing space, particularly in the 50s and 60s, developed the brainstorming as a technique for coming up with ideas, but also developed a creative problem-solving model of saying, don't be constrained, come up with a whole bunch of stuff through a divergent process, and once you finish that, then you can cull. Then you can come back and apply your constraints and reduce what you're talking about in there. So here's some lessons learned, I suppose, from what we did and moving forward. you will more than likely have to give people explicit permission to innovate. They are more than likely not going to do it unless you tell them to. And even then, only when they see that someone else has done it and didn't get burned at the stake, would they perhaps even consider it themselves. People follow the leader. So the leaders have to be on board, living and breathing this. When we rolled out one of our programs in PB, we did what we call parallel comms. Because we knew what was happening was if you'd send an all-staffer email, aren't they a wonderful thing? Staff member goes, yep, that's good, and then goes and talks to their manager and says, so what does this mean for us? And if that manager isn't quite clued up on what's going on and comes up with their first response through a pattern match and goes, well, I don't bloody know. Lost them. Gone. Out of their history. So what we did was, we did what we call parallel comms. So the week before we sent out that all-staffer email, we sent out a personally addressed email to each of the leaders. There were 330 of them in the business. And we started that email with, I need your help. We are wanting to tell your people about these sorts of things that can help them out. Here's what we're doing. Here's the details. If you want any help with communicating this to your team, we've got some people around who can come and help talk to them. But we want you to use your channels, your preferred communication, that your staff are used to receiving this sort of message through, to help us make this stick and make it work. Now we got questions back from people saying, yep, okay, need some more information, want to do this, want to do that. But particularly when we rolled out the new quality management system in the business, through that technique, it was magic. In enrolling those leaders, they influenced their staff, and that's the major stakeholder group that we're looking to do, to get them on board. All good stuff. Anyone heard of this one? User-centered design, customer focus. Another good principle, because what I've run into in the past, and I've probably been guilty of it myself, is what I like to call single user syndrome. And that's where you'll go and talk to the manager of a particular team who will tell you exactly how they work and what they want to see, and the screens they want to see, and the buttons they want to see, and the colour they want it to be, and all that sort of weird and wonderful stuff. And say, and that's how the rest of my team works as well. So if you can deliver that, we'll be right. Wrong answer. You've got to get down to the end user who's going to consume your service. If that is the public, then talk to the public. Get them involved in defining the problem, getting them involved with the design. Set those people up then to influence other people in their networks, and things start happening. Show the benefits and tell the stories. And again, it's the what's in it for me. You've got to have that value proposition for that end consumer. Why the hell would I want to go through this DA process when really it costs me more money when I look next door? If I lived on the other side of the road, because Joe's just done all that when he did the reno on his place, that council over there does it like this. It's easy. And they're doing it for 1/5 the cost that it's costing me to do it here. So telling those stories, getting the story about the value proposition for the person is important. Find the demand. Where is the knowledge being consumed? What are the key critical decisions that are made in your organisation? What are some of the core functions that happen? It's one of the ones I'm dealing with at the moment with the council up in Brisbane. Each individual area is reporting against their performance, against their piece of the pie. But particularly when it comes to something like a development application, which actually touches on several different parts of the business, everyone's measuring their own bit, but no one's measuring the whole lot. There's no owner of the entire process from end to end. So there's all these bits and pieces. Yet there's demand in there for a variety of different information that people are generating themselves, taking a dump out of the database, putting it in Excel and fiddling with it, and then putting it in, taking it from Access over here. We're going to do a bit of this and a bit of that. and then producing a figure that's somehow very different to the figure that comes out of the finance system, or comes out of this system over here, or this system over here. So a lot of diversity there, but finding that demand within those activities, the core activities of the business, is where the knowledge needs to be, where the information needs to be. Find the zealots. Anyone heard of social network analysis? Organisational network analysis? There are people in the business who do not have a level of authority but have a high level of influence over others. There are people in your community who have no authority in any way, shape or form but have a very high influence over others. Those people can be the loudest, most obnoxious opponents to what you're trying to do, but if you can sit them down and get them on side, they will be the biggest champions you've ever had. Imagine taking all that energy that they use and saying, no, it's rubbish, blah, 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 and turning that into positive energy that says, actually, this is pretty good, and why haven't you got on board yet? Pull your finger out, come on. So find those zealots and harness that power, that energy that they have, and use it for good, not evil. This was an interesting one. Where can it make the biggest difference? We introduced a new intranet into the organisation. And we set up these collaboration spaces for all the different departments. And the default approach was, well, let's just create them and let's just give it to them and launch it all at the same time. And we said, well, that's one option. What's another way we could do this to get the best bang for buck? Some people suggested, hey, we could take those high maturity people, the people who get this stuff, our zealots, let's give it to them. And we got some feedback from another group that said, well, that's good, but if you give it to those zealots and they run away with it, we're not going to touch it with a 10-foot barge pole. Because obviously they're used to doing that, they're used to working in that sort of way. Doesn't mean it's going to work for us. So it can actually work against you. But what we did is we picked out two parts of the organisation that we believed, taking them from a very low level of maturity and how they manage their knowledge and information, to even just increment it a little bit, would provide the business with much more value than taking someone who's already at a high level of maturity and just adding another layer. So we found two areas where the absolute dinosaurs in the business. And we sat down with them for 3 months each. We put our team sitting with them at the desks in their pods, working with them on how they could generate the most value from the tools, how they could apply it, what's the value proposition for them, and working with them. And once we did that, we had people come to us saying, well, if that's what you can do for them, imagine what you could do for us. And unfortunately, we were outstripped by demand. Nice sort of situation to be in. Can't get any more resources because you're part of the corporate part of the business, but the demand is out the door. We've got people lining up. It was a classic case where my boss, who was the director of operations, said to me, well, what's your migration schedule in getting people on board here? I said, I don't have one. He said, what do you mean? How am I supposed to hold you accountable for delivering this if you don't have a migration schedule? And I said, well, I could give you one, but it's not going to work. Because different parts of the business at different times will be ready in their own time. So we sat down with the transport guys, for example, and we said, right, here's these new wonderful tools that can help you out. And they said, excuse the language, they said, bugger off. We're over here working on Airport Link at the moment, just, you know, the biggest infrastructure project, transport infrastructure project that Australia's ever had, and we're just a bit busy. And we don't have time to sit down and migrate 1.5 terabytes of documents off that file share over there and stick it in that repository over there. We're actually out there earning money. And I said, okay, you guys go and do that. And let me know if you need a hand. And we'll come back in 6 months. Or 12 months. Because the timing wasn't right. They weren't ready. And we weren't going to do it for them. We weren't going to do the migration for them. But trying to find out the timing is also important, not just about where you can make the biggest difference, but when it's important. That doesn't fit in with people's schedules, unfortunately, and I really love the schedules that are set by parts of the business in the corporate function. HR was a classic one for this in our organisation. we're rolling out this new recruitment process. Okay, that's great. Yes, we're going to do it here, and here, and here, and then all this training's going to be held. Okay, well, good luck with that. We only seem to be having about a third of the people rock up for the training, and our compliance around the adoption of this recruitment process doesn't quite work either. Okay, what did you do? Well, we took HR best practice, and we implemented it. And we said, the recruitment process in this business will take 2 months. Because that's the way we can minimise risk to the business, adopt best practices, get this in place, and provide value to the organisation. So I said, have you spoken to anyone in our Perth office about this? I think there's a couple of people in WA here at the moment. How do they feel about that? Well, it's funny you should say that, Cory, because you were having a few issues in Perth. Why is that? I don't know, these guys in Perth are saying that if they interview someone and they can't actually make them an offer in the interview, then as soon as they walk out the door, they're basically gone. Okay, yes, the demand for engineers in that market at the moment is quite astronomical. And therefore the best practice that does minimise risk to the business is actually doing harm to the business. Because even someone who is partially capable is better than having no resource at all to build out in that particular space. So the managers were saying, let us do this, because we've got a probationary period then. If they don't work out, that's fine. But enable the business to do what's best for business, not what's best practice. So again, we sat down with the HR guys. It was interesting. We had a couple of run-ins with HR, particularly around the language that they used. Anyone here from HR in the room? L&D? OD? Okay, that's all right then. Industrial relations, mobility, employee relations. We sat down with these guys trying to work out how to sort their stuff and put it on the intranet. And I gave them 120 cards with different questions on it. Questions from like, I've been assaulted by my best mate at work, what do I do? To, I want to leave. To, I want a promotion. To, I want more money, etc., etc., etc. And put these out on a big table during the strategy workshop and said, righto, can you sort those into piles for me and just give each name a pile? What do you think they did? They mapped it to the org structure of the HR department. That's a mobility issue. Okay? That's an employee relations issue. Okay, oh look at that, it maps to the org structure. Great. Mobility. Is that where I go to get my mobile phone and my laptop? No, that's about transferring staff across different work sites. Okay. Employee relations. Does that mean I need to start having relations with employees? No, that's completely different. Okay, well that's good. Now we'll just wipe that away and we'll start again. What they eventually came up with third time around was the employee life cycle, which is a constant for every employee in the business. Joining the organisation, becoming productive, developing, promoting, and then leaving the organisation eventually, for whatever reasons. That we're not, we don't have an issue with that at all. Being made productive, no, not at all. But finding that constant, and particularly getting them away from the language. Finance and HR, classic ones around using a language that's their own language, setting their standard, their own best practice, and enforcing that on the business. Understand the implications and the challenges that causes.